Imagine opening up your social media feed, right? And you find out your government is supposedly hitting every single small business in the country with this massive brand new
Yeah,
tax.
right. The panic is just immediate. It's everywhere.
Exactly. The rumors spread like wildfire. But, what if you actually looked at the text of the policy and you realized, wait, the tax isn't actually new at all, and the government is actually cutting the rate in half?
Yeah, I mean, that completely flips the narrative. Suddenly all that outrage starts to look like well, a massive case of collective misunderstanding.
Which is exactly why we are here today. For you listening, we know you want to cut through the noise, right?
Right.
Get to the actual mechanics of what is happening. And today, the mission for this deep dive is just that. We're getting smart on a really complex topic quickly without the information overload. So, our source material today is a fascinating transcript from the Somaliland Big Ideas Forum. And they're tackling a highly debated topic that's generating a massive flood of conflicting opinions online right now. We are talking about Somaliland's goods and services tax reform, or the GST.
Right, the GST. And, just to ground us before we get into the weeds here, when we say GST, we were talking about a consumption tax. It's applied at the exact moment a good or service is sold.
So at the point of sale.
Exactly. You buy a cup of coffee or
Yeah.
you pay for a hotel room, and a tiny calculated fraction of that transaction goes to the government. So it's very distinct from an income tax that gets taken out of your paycheck or a property tax based on your land value.
Got it. And our goal today is purely educational. We're not taking political sides here, left or right. We are going to look strictly at what this forum's experts say the policy actually does, the historical context, and the physical mechanisms of how it works.
Because, yeah, the facts matter.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, because I think we have to address the biggest piece of misinformation circulating online right now, which is this pervasive idea that the GST is this brand new tax invented out of thin air.
Yeah, and that is, frankly, the fundamental misunderstanding driving almost all of this current debate. I mean, according to the forum transcript, this tax has actually existed in Somaliland for years. The legal framework has been on the book.
Wait, for years? So if it's been on the books for years, why on earth does it feel like a sudden shock to the system for so many citizens?
Well, because of the physical realities of how it was historically collected,
Yeah.
and more importantly, who the government historically targeted to collect it from.
Okay, who were they targeting?
For years, the government really focused its GST collection at major physical choke points. We were talking about the Berbera port, major land border crossings, and the airports.
Okay, yeah, that makes logistical sense. I mean, if goods are physically moving through a massive regulated checkpoint, they literally have to stop.
Mhm.
There's a gate, there's a physical ledger, there's a customs officer standing right there. That's obviously the easiest place to capture the data and, the revenue.
Exactly. It's practical.
Yeah.
But beyond those physical entry points, the only other places paying this tax within the domestic economy were a very small, highly select group of large businesses.
Like who?
The source specifically points out major hotels, massive restaurants, and significant commercial enterprises.
Hearing you describe that, it sounds remarkably like a cover charge at a club where, historically, only the most obvious VIPs were asked to pay because they were the easiest to spot.
Oh, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
Like, if you are a massive multi-story hotel, the tax authority knows exactly where you are. But the hundreds of regular people slipping through the side doors, the club just didn't have the bouncers to check all their pockets.
Exactly. The large enterprises were highly visible, relatively few in number, and, frankly, they had the accounting departments to handle the paperwork.
But I have to push back on that approach, though. I understand they were visible, but wasn't that inherently unfair? Why should a large restaurant have to pay a 5% tax while a slightly smaller one down the street pays absolutely nothing?
I mean, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
And the source addresses this historical disparity directly. They argue it wasn't born out of some grand desire to be unfair or, plenish success. It was born out of pure, unavoidable physical limitation.
How so?
Well, you have to rewind 15 to 20 years and look at the economic landscape of Somaliland at that time. Digital technology, mobile financial infrastructure, it was all virtually non-existent in the broader consumer market.
Okay, right. We are talking about an era of physical ledgers, cash stuffed in registers, and manual carbon copy paperwork.
Right. So if the government had attempted to collect a consumption tax from every single tiny shop, market stall, and neighborhood cafe across the entire country using only manual paper systems, the administrative overhead would have been catastrophic.
Meaning the cost to collect it would just be too high?
Exactly. Think about the mechanics. You'd have to hire an army of thousands of tax inspectors.
Oh, yeah?
Those inspectors need salaries, vehicles, offices in every remote town. They would have to physically drive to a market stall, audit a handwritten ledger of cash sales, calculate a percentage, collect the physical cash.
And then securely transport that cash back to a central treasury without it getting lost or stolen along the way.
Yes. It would literally cost the government more money to administer and collect the tax than the tax itself was actually worth.
Yep.
The state would essentially lose money trying to collect it.
Wow. Okay. The pragmatism makes a lot of sense when you put it in physical terms like that. It wasn't just the easiest way, it was really the only mathematically viable way to manage revenue back then.
Exactly.
So, knowing that the tax isn't new explains the past perfectly. But it begs the question, what exactly is this new reform changing today? Which brings us to the shift in the math.
And what's fascinating here is that the central shift is something most of the rumors get completely backward. The government isn't raising the tax rate to squeeze more money out. They were actually lowering the GST rate.
Wait, really? The historical rate for those large VIP businesses was 5%. What are they lowering it to?
The new reform drops that rate down to 2.5%.
Okay, hold on. A 50% tax cut. Usually, when a government gives up half its revenue per transaction, the Treasury goes bankrupt overnight. How does the math on this actually work?
By completely changing the base of the equation. So while the rate is dropping by half, the government is dramatically broadening the tax base. The goal is to bring a significantly larger number of eligible businesses into the system to participate.
So more people paying less.
Exactly. The source actually uses a really elegant analogy to explain the mechanics of this, to sort of move us away from abstract percentages.
Let's build that out.
Okay, so they say, imagine a closed economic system, like a village. And in this village, there are exactly 100 businesses operating.
Okay, a village with 100 businesses.
Right. Now, under the old manual system we just talked about, only 10 out of those 100 businesses were being asked to collect the GST. The large hotels, the big importers. And they were collecting it at that higher 5% rate.
So those 10 businesses are essentially carrying the financial weight of the entire village's public services on their shoulders.
Precisely. They have a heavily concentrated burden, while the other 90 businesses operate entirely outside the tax system.
Carrying nothing at all.
Right. So the reform flips that model. It drops the rate to 2.5%. But instead of just those original 10 businesses, the vast majority of eligible businesses in that village of 100 are now asked to participate.
It shifts the entire philosophy of the system. From a concentrated, heavy burden on a tiny minority to a model of shared responsibility spread widely across the broader economy.
Yeah, everyone eligible contributes, but the individual weight of that contribution per transaction is significantly lighter.
Okay, I see the macroeconomic logic there. The math works on paper, but let me play devil's advocate for the listener for a second.
Go for it.
If I am a small business owner in Somaliland, let's say I own a medium-sized clothing stall in the market, right? And I'm one of those 90 businesses in the village who historically paid nothing. Going from 0% to 2.5% on my sales doesn't feel like a rate cut. You can call it shared responsibility all you want, but to me, that is a tax increase.
I mean, sure, psychologically, it absolutely is.
Right. So how does the government justify pulling all these new businesses into the fold now? Like you said, they physically couldn't do it before. What changed?
Well, to answer that, we have to look at the invisible engine making this entire expansion physically possible without crashing the system. It's technology.
Because, yeah, if they tried to do this 20 years ago, it would have failed.
Exactly. The physical barrier of manual ledgers and cash collection still exists in theory. But Somaliland has fundamentally transformed. The catalyst for this entire reform is digital technology.
Right, because Somaliland has evolved into one of Africa's absolute leaders in digital financial services, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a minor technological upgrade. It's a complete structural shift in how daily economic life operates. The source highlights that millions of daily transactions happen via mobile money.
Millions.
Millions. Somaliland essentially leapfrogged the traditional physical banking infrastructure that, Western countries spent a century building and went straight to a mobile digital-first economy.
Yeah.
Almost every market stall, local shop, neighborhood restaurant now accepts electronic payments.
And that digital ubiquity is what unlocks the GST reform. Let's look at the actual technological magic happening here, because I find this fascinating.
It really is.
In the past, the physical barrier was the cash. A merchant would make a $100 sale in cash, and the government would have to somehow trust that the merchant would manually calculate 2.5%, put $2.50 in a separate glass jar, keep a perfect paper record, and hand it over at the end of the month.
Which is just a massive headache.
Right. The friction is huge. And let's be honest, the temptation to just pocket the $2.50 is even more massive.
Yeah, exactly. Now, compare that to a modern mobile transaction today. The government doesn't need to hire an army of inspectors to check glass jars. Instead, the digital systems integrate directly. The tax authority connects its systems with the telecom networks and the mobile money providers via digital APIs.
And an API being essentially the software bridge that allows two different computer systems to talk to each other instantly.
Precisely. So when a customer walks up to that clothing stall and pays $100 for a jacket using mobile money, the telecom network physically intercepts that digital data packet in the milliseconds before the transaction completes.
Oh, wow. In milliseconds.
Yeah, the software automatically calculates the 2.5% GST. It splits the digital pennies seamlessly. $97.50 drops instantly into the merchant's digital wallet, and the $2.50 tax portion is instantly routed to the government treasury's digital account.
It is essentially like installing a digital, invisible accountant into every single mobile transaction.
Yeah.
You scale the revenue without having to scale the bureaucracy. The merchant doesn't have to fill out complex math on a paper form. The technology does all the heavy lifting.
And it is vastly cheaper to administer. Plus, it's incredibly transparent because every single transaction leaves a permanent, unalterable digital footprint. It removes the compliance burden from the small business owner entirely.
Okay, so we've established how they are collecting the money efficiently. We understand the math of lowering the rate while broadening the base, and we see the technology making it possible. But we really need to connect this back to the ultimate question of why.
Right, the bigger picture.
Yeah, why does a country need to aggressively broaden its tax base in the first place? Why push through the inevitable public pushback?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what domestic taxes actually represent. The forum's experts are very explicit about this. Taxes are an investment in tomorrow's Somaliland.
They aren't just a penalty on business.
Exactly. The source outlines the core infrastructure of modern life. They list very specific things that this funds.
Like what?
Domestic revenue funds the pavement on the roads, connecting rural farms to urban markets. It funds schools and the salaries of the teachers, hospitals, water infrastructure, electricity projects.
Right, the concrete building blocks of a functioning society. And they also heavily emphasize security institutions, digital government services, and modernizing ports and airports.
Yeah, and long-term economic development too. Agricultural advancements, modernizing the livestock industry, and youth employment initiatives.
For you listening, whether you're analyzing global economies or just looking at your own local government, this is a universal blueprint. A country's infrastructure is directly tied to its ability to collect domestic revenue efficiently. You just can't have paved roads without a mechanism to fund them.
And the experts at the forum draw some really powerful international parallels to drive this point home. They point to places like Singapore, Estonia, South Korea, and Rwanda.
When you look at those specific nations, what's the common denominator?
What they share is an understanding of sovereignty. None of those countries reach their current prosperity by relying forever on external assistance.
Because foreign aid comes with strings attached.
Exactly. And it's dependent on the goodwill of outside actors. Those nations realized they had to build strong domestic economies. They had to capture domestic revenue reliably and reinvest it directly back into their own infrastructure.
You have to fund your own development. And if your tax system remains stuck in the manual methods of 20 years ago, your infrastructure will remain stuck there too.
Precisely. A growing economy requires a modern revenue system.
So what does this all mean? When we take all these threads from the Somaliland Big Ideas Forum, the actual policy looks remarkably different from the social media rumors.
Oh, completely different.
This isn't a brand new tax. It's a modernization of an old one. They're dropping the rate to 2.5%, expanding the base, and using digital mobile money to make collection automatic and efficient.
Right. And importantly, the forum concludes with a very specific call to action. They encourage citizens to ask questions, but not based on fear, based on facts.
What should citizens be asking instead?
They want the public to demand transparency. Citizens must ask how these funds will be managed, because an informed public that actively demands accountability is what strengthens a democracy. When a government relies on domestic taxes, it has to answer to its own citizens.
Which leaves me with a really fascinating behavioral question to chew on, and I want to pose this directly to you, the listener. We just broke down how brilliant it is that digital infrastructure makes tax collection practically invisible, right? No physical paperwork, zero friction.
Seamless.
But if digital infrastructure makes tax collection entirely automatic and practically invisible during our everyday mobile transactions, does that frictionless experience make us less aware of the taxes we're paying?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right. And if we don't feel the pain of paying taxes manually, could that actually decrease the very civic demand for government accountability that the source is hoping for? If you don't even notice the tax leaving your digital wallet, will you still fight as hard to make sure the government spends that money wisely?
That is a brilliant tension. Mechanical efficiency versus conscious civic awareness. Every modernizing digital economy is going to have to grapple with that.
Definitely something for you to mull over or explore on your own. Thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive. We hope digging into the mechanics and the history of this reform gave you a solid, factual foundation, because knowledge is always stronger than misinformation.
Absolutely.
We'll catch you on the next one.